Some Christians face special animosity from the courts because of their beliefs, according to the barrister representing the couple who are Pentecostal Christians who were refused permission to be foster parents on the grounds that they are opposed to homosexuality. He's Paul Diamond, the barrister, who's told the couple, Eunice and Owen Johns, that it would be futile to appeal to the High Court because he says the courts are, and I quote him, set against religious freedom for Christians. Well, he's with us, and so is the former Lord Chancellor, Lord Faulkner. How widely do you believe that what you see as a prejudice, Paul Diamond, is prevalent in the court?
I think there is a very serious issue now. I think there's something wider than this afoot. There's something very wrong with the moral and ethical and legal compass of our country as a whole. There've been some very surprising judicial decisions, and a track has taken place on a number of decisions on the predominance in anti-discrimination legislation, which is prevailing over freedom of religion. And we've reached a state in our society where sexual orientation rights prevail and have primacy over freedom of religion, and that is not a healthy state to be in.
Well, the question of freedom of religion is surely one that has two aspects to it. One is your freedom to practice privately your own beliefs, whatever they are. The problem is, if you have a belief that comes into conflict with the law, which prevails? I mean, for example, if you have a sect which believes in polygamy, should they be allowed to say, we don't believe in marriage, and any law which promotes marriage, we don't have to respect?
No, I mean, that's a bit of a false ball. I mean, obviously, there's limitations on all rights.
Well, I'm just interested in where you think the limit is.
Well, I think the problem is the religious freedom is a core human right, and it requires dignity. And what is taking place is a coerced imposition of a new morality or a new immorality, depending where you set foot on this spectrum.
Well, let's put this to Lord Faulkner.
I don't think that's right. I think we've had pretty clear principles: religious freedom, the right to express your religion, equally the fact that religion is the reason you did something that was against the law is not a justification. So a simple example, if you believe that girls shouldn't be educated, only boys should, you're not excused from the law that says you've got to send your children to school.
So there's always going to be a limit.
Yeah, and there's always going to be a line. And what Paul is saying is he's dressing that line up, which always exists in a secular society, as being an anti-Christian aspect of our life, and it isn't. But it is the inevitable aspect of the law drawing the line as what is permissible behaviour, what is not.
But I suppose a lot of people listening will remember the case of the woman wearing the crucifix, who was, I think, sacked, I hope I've got the facts right, by British Airways, remember, not allowed to wear it at work.
Yeah.
Now, some people will say, hang on, this isn't somebody with a kind of off-centre sort of weird belief which is in conflict with the law. This is somebody who wants to wear a crucifix, and they would say, I guess, if she'd wanted to wear a burqa, she'd have got away with it. And it's that kind of thing that people will feel that Paul Diamond's alluding to.
Well, it's a very good example, isn't it? Because what British Airways were saying there is, we've got a rule about what you wear, we don't want people to wear anything except our uniform. The fact that you want to wear a crucifix on top of your uniform, we're not discriminating against you because of religious reasons, we're treating you exactly the same as everybody else. And the law says you shouldn't be discriminated against because of religion, but equally religion doesn't give you special favours.
Well, yes. Aren't you asking for special favours, Paul?
No, we're not. No one wants special favours, and a free society doesn't have that. The problem is you can't have a law where the state says the boundaries of the law are drawn. The King's writ can't run throughout the land. Where that is a totalitarian state. There are limits in a free society.
Well, hang on. What about Lord Faulkner makes the point that, let's take an extreme case of somebody who says we don't believe girls should be educated. Some weird... They say, that's what I believe because I'm part of a particular, religious sect or group that believes this. Are you suggesting that the law should not be capable of trumping that
No,
view?
I'm not. But we've got two good examples just given before. First, we've got the British Airways case, and Lord Falkner's answer is wholly inadequate. I mean, it's a ludicrous policy by British Airways. But what was more alarming about that decision was that the judge at first instance said there's no discrimination, as Lord Falkner said, because if a Muslim wore a cross, they'd be sacked as well by British Airways, so they're treated the same. And presumably the poor Christian lady, it was one of my early cases, was entitled to wear hijab. And let's take the Johns case, because this...
These are the two people who said that they were told they couldn't be foster parents because they didn't accept homosexuality.
That's right, and these are very decent, wholesome people with a spare room in their house which they wanted to foster. Never did I think, back in '97, due respect when Lord Falkner's party came to power, I would be doing cases on the right to wear a cross. Decent, wholesome families would be excluded from adoption and fostering. It's a very serious situation.
Lord Faulkner.
The Johns case doesn't decide that, as Mr. Diamond knows. What it says is there might be circumstances in which being antithetical to homosexuality would make you unsuitable to be a foster carer in a particular case. What they said in that case was we'd need to look at the facts of an individual situation.
And they didn't say it's a question of which religion you have, it's what you believe about the kind of people who might come to your house.
Spot on, exactly right. And anybody who held these views, whether because they were homophobic or whether they were because they were Christian, might, not definitely would, might be unsuitable. Take the case of a child of 11 or 12 who's not sure about his or her sexuality. Yes. Would it be sensible? And that's all that they said.
Paul Diamond, isn't that the truth of it, that the fact that they were Pentecostal Christians who had this very strong belief about homosexuality is, in a sense, neither here nor there? I mean, whether they were Christian or Muslim or whatever it was the fact of the view that was held by the authorities to be incompatible with fostering.
Yes, but I mean, I think the reason we're not appealing that case is because we have very little hope of confidence of that being reversed. And what is lying behind this? The courts and judges are meant to be guardians of people's rights. They're meant to protect people from intrusive and excessive state interference into private affairs. The courts are too close to the government. There are decent judges and decent judges under bad laws, and there are actually a lot of very poor quality judges, and this judgment was actually more known for its vitriol, I would say, than any sound reasoning in the logic of the argument. And that is why we need to go to Parliament. Parliament's got to address this. The courts cannot deal with these human rights balances. They've got themselves in a cul-de-sac. There are a number of very poor decisions, and it needs to be reversed.
That is an argument. Sorry, yeah.
I mean, that is just to attack the judges as giving a poor judgment is utter rubbish in this case. If you read the judgment in Johns, it's a very powerful restatement of the secular nature of our society, but very sympathetic to protecting the rights of individual religions and making precisely the point that you made, Jim, which is it's not because of religious beliefs that the Johns, who are obviously very admirable people, were prevented from being... Well, they weren't prevented from being foster carers. They might have been in a particular case. Yes. It's all about the welfare of children, and of course, courts do have an obligation to look after children as well.
Well, I mean, this is the kind of nonsense of the logic. It's not because of religious beliefs, it's because of your views on A, B, C. And the British Airways woman wasn't discriminated across on her religious beliefs. She was breaking the uniform policy.
But the interesting question here is whether another couple who had no religious basis for this belief, but indicated, because they were filling in a form or whatever it is, that they had very strong views about homosexuality, might have been... prevented or potentially prevented in exactly the same way as the Johns on those grounds.
Yes, I think you're sort of slightly alluding to a slightly wider question on the value and privilege and status and respect to religion. And I'm afraid because there's a lot of talk about secular state and rejecting our foundations as a state and our Judeo-Christian heritage.
But those are two separate things. You can have a secular state that does not reject Judeo-Christian heritage.
You can, but I don't think we've got that. I think we have got one that's driving it out the public forum, and I would advocate a non-sectarian state, if I may put it in that new language. But I think lying behind all this is a reality. A lot of the cases I have, which would be seemed very absurd a few years ago, British people are frightened. There's a liberal tyranny in this land. People are scared to say what they think, and they're scared to practice their religious belief. And through all the agencies of the state, through adoption agencies, equality policies, guidance from the state, the balance has gone too far. And I think we call on the Prime Minister to address these issues. He's made a number of powerful speeches regarding the European Human Rights Convention. Needs to be revisited, the Human Rights Act, and there needs to be a rebalancing, and the courts aren't able to do it.
Last word, Lord
I mean, one of the things that the judges say in the Johns case is the overblown language of Mr. Diamond states the position in a completely misleading and overstated way, and I believe what we've just heard is exactly an example of that.